Gear and safety. I'm here with the wonderful Jessie Hahn, who's going to tell you everything. My name is Molly Mixa. I'm with the City of London and Smart Commute London. I'll just say a few words to acknowledge the land here. I'm coming from London, situated at the forks of the Thames River, or Antler River, or Deshkanzibi in Anishinaabemowin. We in London here are in the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lunapeyak, and the Attawandaron people. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and we here are neighbors to 3 sovereign Indigenous nations to the southwest, the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. And I'd encourage everyone to be informed about their own traditional lands, treaties, history, and the cultures of the Indigenous people in your local area. And then, are we on to the next slide? This webinar will be recorded and updated on the SmartCommute.ca website, so you can review it again later at your leisure. Smart Commute is an association of several different municipalities in the GTHA, Bruce County, Sudbury, London, Halton region. Jessie, tell me if I'm missing anybody. I think it'll come up on another slide anyway.
Should be on the next slide.
Okay, we welcome everyone. There we go. York region, with the support of Point A, where Jessie's from. It's an Ontario-based initiative that addresses commuting challenges by delivering programs that expand access to sustainable transportation options, reward behavior change, and provide education. We have some of our services include the Smart Commute app, the Emergency Ride Home program, Smart Commute campaigns like Bike Share campaign, Bike Month, a carpooling program, cycling program, commuter assessments, and more. And now we have some pre-webinar questions that are going to come up for you in the chat, I believe. So hopefully people see this. I'll just give you a minute to answer those couple of questions.
Then while it's happening, we can switch over and I can go ahead and share my screen.
Okay, so I will stop sharing. Over to you, Jessie.
Perfect, thank you. So hello everyone, I'm Jessie Hahn. I'm a program manager at Point A. So thank you all so much for coming for our presentation. So I'm going to keep the poll questions running, but I'm going to just quickly introduce who I am. So basically, I've been with Point A, and I'll explain more about what we are. But basically, we've been with the team since 2022, so that's about 4 years almost. Some things about me is that I am a CAN Bike Level 4 instructor, so that means I know how to ride a bike pretty well, and provide cycling education to our workplaces. So we're based in Toronto, but we do operate in different places in Ontario. So in the Halton municipalities, like Oakville, Halton Hills, and we'll do some in other areas around Ontario. And then so there's that. Fun things about me is that I am a triathlete and snowboard instructor. So all year long, I'm doing something active and fun. And on top of that, too, I am the founder of a local community group called Northwick Cycles. So we deliver weekly group rides around our neighborhood and as well bike tune-up events wherever. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything during this presentation, you can always contact me at jhan@pointa.ca. So go ahead and actually, before I go, let me just quickly talk about Point A. So Point A is a nonprofit organization committed to improving access to sustainable transportation options through tailored programming. And so we've been around since 2001 as the first Transportation Management Association, TMA for short, in Ontario. Basically, that means we just do sustainable commuting programs in workplaces. And so some of the stuff we do is we provide the SmartCommute program, which you are all here for. Some of the things we do is a shuttle bus. We do a best workplaces for commuters designation or award. And finally, we do an active school travel program. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out the pre-webinar polls. I hope everyone answered that. It helps me understand, helps all of us understand why you came to this presentation. But regardless, so here's what's the agenda for today. So basically, everything that I talk about is based off the Cycle Toronto's the Toronto Cyclist Handbook. I know it says the word Toronto, but the context of it all is applicable across Ontario, whether it's the laws of the Highway Traffic Act, just how you ride in general. All these sort of things are applicable to anyone here in Ontario. So I'll talk about reasons to ride, parts of the bicycle, just about gear, safety, rules of the road, how to ride, like in terms of technique and etiquette to ride safely, and then finally kind of planning your route. And I'll try to leave room for some questions and answers in case you have some questions that I can answer. All right, so first off, why do any of us want to even cycle? There are a lot of reasons and benefits to it. First of all, cycling regularly improves your physical and mental health. And on top of that too, it is in certain circumstances, it is a faster way to get around places compared to public transit or driving. So if anyone's ever been to downtown Toronto, it's just like New York. It's like Manhattan. It's just congestion everywhere you go, and sometimes you just walk or bike, and it's faster than getting around by car. And on top of that too, cycling does contribute to reducing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. On top of that too, it is very affordable. If in the context of things, so when you own a bike in the long term, you never have to pay for parking or gas, and I'm sure everyone's seen the price of gas these days. So there's that. And of course, if your city or town has some sort of rentable city bike, so some sort of bike share program, this is such a great and cheap way to get around places. And finally, cycling is fun. Whether you cycle recreationally around your neighborhood for active stuff, or you cycle to commute to work or to commute to school, to do some to get to do some errands or whatever. It's just a great way to explore your neighborhood, get to do different things, and as well you can be connected with other cycling groups and communities and make friends. Okay, next up, I'll talk about the bike. There's a lot of parts. I won't kind of get into the nitty-gritty things because it will overwhelm you. I know when I first learned how to ride about parts of the bike, I was like, what? So the things to think about, and I'll kind of zoom in more detail. Whoops. Oh, no. So basically, we'll start at the handlebar area. So obviously, if you've seen a bike, there's the handlebar that helps you steer. Typically, you might want to have a bell and a front light there. And of course, there are things called shifters. So that's where you're shifting your gears in the back and the front. And as well, you just have brake levers so that you can stop yourself. And then there are parts, the stem and the headsets, but that's a bit of a technical piece that kind of raises or adjusts the fit of the bike with you. Another key part. So I've been cycling for a while, and some things that do come up is that people kind of assume the wheel is just made of a tire, but there are actually two parts to the wheel. So obviously there's the frame of the tire, so it's called the rim. So that's the metallic part of it, and that's kind of supported together with some spokes. So that's the little pieces all around the wheel. Now, in the wheel, there are two parts. One is called the inner tube. So that's what actually holds the air inside your tire. Obviously, if you've got a special wheel that runs tubeless, which is kind of a recent, I wouldn't say not too recent, but it's been around for a bit. People kind of do go for the tubeless option. But there's that. And then finally, the outer part is the tire, so where all the treading happens, and there are many different types of tires for different circumstances. Whether you're a road cyclist trying to get that speed, or if you're trying to ride on gravel or in the wintertime, you might want to go for something with more tread. So there's that part of the wheel. Uh, Derailleur. So when I first heard the word derailleur, I was like, what does that mean? Basically, think of it as the gear shifting pieces. So typically in bikes, not all bikes, but most bikes that I've seen have a front and a rear derailleur. And so you can kind of see where they are exactly. And that's kind of what helps you shift. So when you're shifting your gears, these are the things that will actually move the chain between the different gears. And within the gears, there are two different names of stuff. So here it says cockset, but really it's called a cassette. Probably both interchangeable in their terminology, but yes, this in the back here it's the cassette, and then in the front is the chain rings. And then in the frame of the bike, you have this fork here, and then you have three types of tubes: the top tube, down tube, and the seat tube. And it's helpful to know about the tubes in particular because you can add all sorts of bags on top of it if you're going bike packing or whatever not. And of course, you got the seats, the rear lights if you have one, and then the steep seat post over there. Okay. So I'm going to talk about gear and safety checks. So how do we know that the bike works for you? So basically, there's a fit piece to it. So basically, if you just stand on top of the bike, basically, so if you're standing on top of the bike and the top tube is like riding right up in your underneath, it's too tall for you. But if it's too low, then it's too low and too small for you. So somewhere where it's like just getting close enough to your underneath, that's a pretty good fit for you. And then when you're sitting on the saddle, basically, so you got your pedals, and basically your leg extension should be not straight completely, but has a little bit of bend at the very bottom part of the pedal. Then that's a pretty good fit for you. And some things to note about bike fits. So sometimes when you're making temporary adjustments to bicycles, it can cause some sort of discomfort for a while, but usually that will kind of go away for a bit. So let's say, for example, when I first got my own road bike, for example, that one requires me to be a little more crouched forward a bit, which kind of strained a lot of my back neck. The back of my neck over here, but in a couple of days, in a couple of weeks, that discomfort went away because I got used to it. But really poorly fitted bicycles and body positions can cause prolonged pain, numbness. I've heard numbness in the hands and the hips and everything, and can cause injuries. So play around with different fits that will work with you. Another thing to think about is, does your helmet fit? Obviously, everyone here knows that the helmet is the most important thing to wear, and everyone should be wearing a helmet. So the way to know that your helmet fits you perfectly is obviously you got to put on your head, and it shouldn't feel generically too loose. In here, some helmets have a head width kind of tension piece. So it's a knob, you just turn that up left or right, clockwise or counterclockwise, and that should either increase or decrease the tension to wrap around your head. But there's also a fun thing we do. It's called the 2v1. So basically you have two fingers that basically will be on your eyebrow like this. And let's assume your helmet's right on top of that. That's just how much of a width you have between your eyebrow and the front of your helmet. If your helmet's too up here or it's too low, it's not going to protect your head, or it will block your vision. So just enough coverage over there. The V should basically be the strap of your helmet should come neatly around your ears like this in a V shape. And basically 1 indicates that, so when you do up your chin strap, it should not be loose at all. It should be pretty tight, but not so tight that you're suffocating. You should only be able to fit 1 finger in there. If your whole hand and your whole arm can kind of get through it, then it's too loose. Gotta tighten that up. And one fun key piece is that I always suggest that people get a pretty credible helmet. One of the pieces that are recognized is called MIPS. Not sponsored by them or anything, but in a lot of races that I do, people they do check for this sort of designation, and that's for your own safety. They do test their helmets to make sure that they are safe for your head. Because if you buy any kind of generic helmets, you don't know if it's actually going to protect your head and when an accident does occur. So there's that. Other things, clothing, huge piece of consideration. So whether you just ride casually for fun or you're trying to look like your favorite best road cyclist of all time, Tadej Pogacar, there are a lot of different cycling fits to think about. So obviously get something that's pretty comfortable and a bit stretchy. Also try to wear something that is colorful or reflective, and then a third piece is bike shorts. So if you don't know, especially if you're on a road bike or something, saddles can be pretty stiff, or if you're riding for a long period of time, your groin area is going to get pretty sore. So bike shorts are actually designed with this thing called a chamois, which is like a nice cushioning piece. And so that just kind of gives you some padding to for you so you can ride for longer and with more comfort. Fourth part is sunglasses. You can wear sunglasses when it's sunny out, of course, but sometimes if you're cycling, there might be debris or bugs that you don't want to hit your eye with. So having that protective piece is always really helpful. Fifth is this thing called arm and leg sleeves. So they're just like fabric materials. You can just like pull it on your arms and your legs, and you can put it on or put it off. This is really great for the spring and the fall time when the weather really fluctuates. So in the morning time it's super cold, but in the afternoon it gets pretty hot. You can kind of take these easy to take off garment pieces. Six is cycling gloves. So cycling gloves in particular are designed to be pretty grippy, especially if you're really sweating. You want something that's kind of grippy so you don't slip off your handlebar. So there's that. And finally, cycling caps, skull caps or balaclavas. These are designed to fit just as a first piece, and then you can put your helmet on top. They're just nice if it's rainy or, especially with the case of skull caps or balaclavas, when it's like really in the wintertime or when it's very cold, you can wear that and it fits neatly with your helmet on top. Attires that are not good for cycling, and my many years of experience, is that you don't want to wear something with baggy pants, dresses, or flowy skirts. Not to say you like, if you need to wear those and you got to ride with that, then it is what it is. But from my experiences and from what I've seen, these things do get caught in the chain and in the gears, and it's just like a whole mess. It will ruin your outfit. I've seen like skirts and baggy pants being like ripped because people have worn these and get caught in the chain. So if you love your clothes, try not to wear these things. I also suggest not wearing loose footwear, so like flip flops, sandals, that sort of stuff. Especially flip flops. If you're riding and your flip flop falls off, it's kind of a hassle. You got to go back and get your flip flop back, so that's not good. And finally, don't wear dark clothes at nighttime when you're cycling out, even on the sidewalk or anything. For whatever reason, you are quite invisible, especially if you don't have any lights on. So wear something that's bright will make you at least decently more visible. All right, so that's the clothing and piece of it. Now we're gonna get to this thing called the ABC safety check. So what is the A part? A is for air. So basically, obviously, as everyone knows, tires have air. You want to put enough air in your tire, and that you also want to check that the wheels are spinning freely. So basically, the reason why we put air in our tire, whether it's your car or in the bike, is several things. First, it reduces the rolling resistance and how much pedaling you need to do, and as well, it improves the grip, the stability, and the bike handling. So I've ridden some bike share bikes where, for example, where the tires are completely deflated and I've been skidding all over the place. It's like not a fun time. So to make yourself safer, you want to inflate your tires. And as well, you want to protect the rim wheels, so the frame of the wheel, from damage and wear. And finally, to prevent this thing called pinch flats. Basically, they are a type of puncture that commonly happens with bike tires. And then a fun thing to note actually is that if you you can actually lower your air pressure sometimes, and that works if you anticipate that you're riding in rough terrain, so gravel or wet or muddy surfaces. Um, and as well, you can also use that as a trade-off between riding efficiency, so like how like you're riding faster or more better, for some comfort, because the lower air pressure kind of absorbs a little bit more uh, shock in the ground, so you have less bounce, but not too much where it's completely deflated. And over here, so all tires should have some sort of metric to tell you how much pressure, air pressure you put in your tire, so PSI. So road tires can go up to 80 to 100. Generically, the average person's tire might range around 50, I would say. But check your specific tire to see, and air pressure to see how much air you should put. B stands for brakes. So brakes and bars, basically you want to check to see that your front and back brakes are working separately and like they work well, and as well your handlebars are aligned with the bike itself. It's not wobbly or anything like that. And obviously, the purpose of this is to ensure that when you're braking, the bike is actually able to slow down and stop safely. Otherwise, you'll get into a crash. Um, so with that, what you want to do is you want to gauge each part separately. So a front brake, and if you engage the front, basically we do the wheel test. So if you engage your front brake, you push the bike forward, and ideally the whole bike should just stay in place while you're trying to push it gently. And then same thing, if you're trying to engage the back brake and you want to go back, it should stay in place that way. So if it stays in place, that's pretty good. If not, then you might want to make some adjustments. Obviously, the floor is quite slippery. It's going to slide regardless, but it's a good measurement to see that the brakes are working. And also check your brake pads to make sure it's not completely worn out. Because a worn out brake pad won't break anything, won't stop you from braking. So there's that. And check to make sure that the brake levers, so brakes are usually on both sides, make sure that they're balanced so that it's not just one side that's stopping, it's actually both together. Um, and finally, when it's rainy or in wet conditions, it's always better to ride slower and brake earlier, because hydroplaning happens in cars. It's the same concept happens in cycling. I own a rim brake wheel, so the one on the top here. And so basically, one time I was riding in the rain and I tried to brake and I've squeezing the brake as hard as I could, but I'm just sliding and I almost hit a fence. So try to just be safer. This in the bottom here is called a disc brake. Those are kind of a better version of braking system. They're usually pretty good at braking, in especially in wet conditions. All right, C. C is a lot of things, but typically it's about the chain, it's about the crank, the cassettes, the chain rings, whatever. So a couple of things to look for is whether the chain is tight, and it's lubricated, it's on the gears itself, and then when you're pedaling it, the pedals spin freely. And as well, the crank arm, it's not making any cranking or weird noises. It's not wobbly, feels pretty good. And then obviously, as you're pedaling, you want to kind of try your gear shifting to ensure that the chain is shifting between all the gears. And if it's not, then you might have some problems. So that's basically what you're trying to check for. If you hear squeaking sounds while you're pedaling, while you're cycling, that might be a good indication that you might need to re-lubricate your chain with chain lube. Don't use WD-40 because that's going to just wear out all the grease, everything, and just kind of completely wear out all of everything in your bike. Okay, moving on. So little children. So by law, toddlers and small children must be seated in an approved bike seat or bike trailer. So in Ontario, this rule where basically it's illegal for two people to ride on a bicycle meant for one person. So you can see in the bottom here, there's the bike seats, or you can use a bike trailer. You've probably seen them in places. So these are really great. Now, with the introduction of and the rollout of e-bikes and everything, obviously we've seen e-cargo bikes being an option. Now, people probably assumed, but actually technically at the time of this recording, passengers under 16 years or younger aren't allowed to be on e-cargo bikes. So I know there's this gentleman here, Dave Shelnut, who I know. He's got his kid on an e-cargo bike like this. Technically not allowed to do this. But so there's that. Now, another piece is bells, lights, reflective stuff. So by law, all bicycles must be equipped with a front white light and a rear red lights, or at least some sort of reflective red piece in the back from dusk to night conditions. This is the same concept. If you've done your driver's license, this is the same rule that applies for that for the cars too. And so, you can have a bell, you can have a horn to that's also required at all times, and use them when you're trying to pass pedestrians, cyclists, or motorists to let them know that you're trying to pass or whatever the case might be. And especially nighttime, it's also good to wear bright and reflective clothing so that drivers, especially at nighttime, when their lights shining on you, you are quite visible. So you can see that over here. So yeah, basically white front light, red backlight. All sorts of bells are fine. Horns are also great too. If you want to get technical, if you want to splurge on something, this is a piece of gear I have that's super great, especially as a road cyclist. So this is the Garmin Varia RTL 515 with a bike computer. And so what's special about this one in particular is that with the red light like this on your rear, connected to your bike computer, it will actually tell you. And so you see these white dots here, it'll actually tell you the distance and how many obstacles, so whether it's a car or a cyclist, are coming behind you and how close they are to you. So and it'll actually send out some beeping alarms, so it'll notify you when there is someone coming behind you. So it's a nice little piece of tech that's been growing over the years. All right, another thing, locks. So bike locks, why do we have it? It's just simply to deter thefts from happening. I've had my bike stolen several years ago. I'm very sad about it to this day. So always lock your bike, the frame, the wheel, everything like that. If your wheel has a quick release, so if there's some sort of tool or some sort of lever that makes it easy for you to take off the wheel from the bike without the use of any sort of tools, then you're going to need some sort of cable lock or a U-lock to secure that piece to the bike frame. Otherwise, it's so easy for someone to take your wheel off your bike, and you'll be pretty sad about that. From my experiences of all sorts of locks, do not cheap out on locks. Dollarama locks are very easy to break. I've seen people with that garden scissor shear. They use that one go, it breaks the cable lock so easy. So don't cheap out on locks. Get something with Kryptonite's a pretty good, credible brand, but I'm sure people here in the comments can probably attest and add comments about things that some sort of locks that they use. Fun pieces of things that I've learned over the years is that if you own a U-lock, tape it with gaffer tape. Apparently, so bike thefts go through the extremes. They'll actually use grinder blades. So they'll try to saw their way through U-locks. Using that tape will kind of ruin the grinder blades. So people will go through extremes to steal your bike. So using all sorts of measures to prevent these things will be great for you. Okay, and then another piece is fenders and panniers. So as you can see, if you don't use fenders and it's a rainy or muddy day, this typically is what happens. I'm sure raise of hands or emotes here if you've experienced this personally, where you've ridden in the rain and you look behind you and all of a sudden you're covered in mud. I've had that experience, so it's no fun to have to do the laundry afterwards or to clean up your bags after. So I always suggest wearing a fender as one piece. There's ones for the front and for the back. Another alternative is that you can install a pannier piece. So this is a nice frame here on the back, and then you can actually add your bikes here. So there's also a really great alternative to minimize the amount of dirt and grime that gets on you and your bike. All right, and now we're going to talk about the rules of the road. But before, I'm going to grab some water. But beforehand, how often does everyone ride a bike? Throw in the chat here. In the week, how often do people ride in the week, or hope to ride? Okay, love that. Mary says 2-3 times. Pamela says every day. Love it. Okay, so got my water, ready to go. So rules of the road. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Highway Traffic Act. I'm not a lawyer, guys, so if you have really technical questions, don't ask me. I'm not your person, but I can explain about a few things, very generic things that everyone kind of knows about. So the Highway Traffic Act outlines that all road users, including cyclists, um, are a vehicle, and so they must behave as such. And so you're required to follow all traffic laws, as well as laws that are very specific to cycling. Um, in terms of a license, because this is a very big topic everyone loves to talk about, you don't need a license to ride a bike, whether it's electric or not. But there's this situation that's been evolving with the Ontario government, where e-bikes and mopeds and all these sort of things might come into becoming a licensed piece. But at the time of this recording, it's not in place just yet. So we'll see maybe next year in the future what licensing might look like for the more electronic bicycle pieces. But at this time, yes, no one licenses aren't required, but a cyclist who disobeys a traffic law can be stopped by police officers and can be fined for anything that they've committed. And so riding on the road, some general rules. The slowest moving vehicle, like a bicycle, should occupy the road closest to the curb. So typically in Ontario, we all ride on the right side of the road, unless the road was designed for something else. Always stay on the right side. So when you're passing, drivers and other cyclists should kind of give you some space. For drivers, it should be at least 1 meter of space to pass you. Drivers who fail to do that can be punished with a 110 fine and 2 demerit points. If you join your driver's license, you've probably seen this somewhere in your test. When you're occupying a lane, so there's some typical pieces to think about. In the case of a one street, one way, where you feel like it's unsafe for the driver to pass you, then you're actually allowed to occupy the whole lane yourself until it is safe for the driver to pass you. So, and I suggest you kind of occupy that whole lane, not to allow yourself and the driver to get into any accidents or to put yourself in any dangers. In situations where there are 2, 3, multiple lanes going the same way, cyclists can ride two abreast, we call it. So they can ride side by side. And because that, there are other lanes for drivers to come around you. This is great to ride social, like together as a group, for whatever reasons might be. So that's all technically legally allowed. There are other pieces in the Toronto Cycling Handbook that mentions about, common examples of ticketable offenses, both as a driver and as a cyclist. As a cyclist, it's basically, if 2 people are riding on the road on a bike where they're not supposed to, it's a $110 fine. If you disobey a stop sign or fail to stop, it's also $110. Improper arm signaling, hand signaling, it's also $110. Improper bicycle lights, also $110. Fail to stop at a red light. That's a really big common one that we see lots of crimes committed. That's a $325 fine. And then a careless operation of a bike or a vehicle is $490. Other things to think about. So sidewalks. So as adults, everyone here is an adult. We are all not allowed to ride on a sidewalk. Children 14 years or younger, I'm seeing in different municipalities, sometimes that age number might fluctuate a little bit, but typically children are allowed to ride on the sidewalk. But older adults, sorry, we all got to ride on the road. To your discretion. I'm not the police. I won't tell you what to do, but I'm suggesting this as the rule. Children and helmets. So all riders under 18 must wear a helmet. I've seen parents get fined because the police have caught children where they're not wearing the helmets, and that kind of carries over to the parents as such. So some things for drivers that crimes have been committed. So insufficient passing distance, that one I've already talked about. Dooring, that's a pretty common one. So if someone, the driver or passengers open the door and the cyclist hit that door, that driver can be fined with $365 and 3 demerit points. And some sort of distracted driving can be $490 plus 3 points. There are so many different rules and ticketable offenses for cyclists and drivers that I won't cover because we're getting close to the end of this webinar, so read it at your own time. So riding safety techniques and etiquettes. So share the road. Be mindful of your position with everyone else on the road. Always watch out for the pedestrians and give them the right of way, even if they're wrong. Just let them be, and then you'll get around. And refrain from using headphones or other distractions while cycling. If you are cycling, so this is kind of the more technical piece, the technique piece, uh, don't swerve. So try to be predictable, ride in a straight line for the most part. So you can see in here, if you're weaving through parked cars or through things, you are very unpredictable to drivers, and that can cause some incidents to happen. If you ride kind of the middle, that at least everyone feels a little better about the situations. And try to not ride too close to parked cars because you don't want to hit a car door, and because that leads to injuries and accidents. And finally, always check your surroundings, check your blind spots before changing lanes, and actually lastly, ride defensively. So if you've probably been taught to drive defensively. So always anticipate the behaviors of other road users. Same situation happens for cyclists. If you see drivers are going to turn left, right, or whatever, try to anticipate these things beforehand so you avoid any incidents from occurring. Um, don't ride too close to the curb because there's a lot of hazards that can be happening that may actually require you to swerve around them. And I've seen all these things happen here in Ontario. So potholes are a big one. Your tire can get caught in one, or you'll probably see some major ones like these. Sewer grates are a common one, especially if you have a small, narrow road tire. They can easily get caught in them. Glass is also a pretty common one. I've seen people ride through glass, and the next thing you know, their wheels are punctured. So that's no fun. Sand, gravel, that can happen. Here, we have several beaches, and here in Ontario, when you ride on gravel or sand, it's very slippery, and I've seen people fall off their bikes because of this. Puddles are also pretty common ones. People ride through puddles thinking, oh, it should be fine, but sometimes they don't realize that some puddles are actually quite deep, and so they just end up falling to one, do a front flip. It's no fun. And the last thing that I commonly see, especially actually in all sorts of places, roadkill is unfortunately a sad one to see, but that happens quite a lot. So hand signaling. So basically, if you want to turn left, use your left hand to point left. If you want to stop, only use your left hand and point it in a 90-degree facing downwards like that. If you want to do a right turn, there are two ways you can do it. One way is obviously the driver approach, where you use your left hand to point upwards like this. This is because of the fact that as a car, you can't stretch your arm out to the other side, to the passenger side. So this is the only way to do it. But typically, it's way easier to just point your arm out this way, because sometimes when you're pointing your arm out this way, people just think you're like, oh, thanks, or whatever, or you're just saying hi, but you're really just trying to tell people you're going right. So it's always easy just to point at where you're trying to go, and whatever you're not. And one fun tip is that when you're riding with a group, it's always just helpful to just point at hazards and yell it out so that the group can hear, especially those in the back, can hear about these things and avoid the hazards accordingly. Turns. So when you're turning in intersections, there are two ways you can approach it. One is, especially as a beginner or a novice, you can kind of just get close to the intersection, hop off, dismount your bike, and just walk on the sidewalk and the crosswalks to get to where you need to go. But if you feel comfortable, you can try to check your blind spots, check your surroundings, and then switch over to either the left turn lane or be on the left side of the single lane that you've got. And one thing I've seen commonly a lot is that you should not be on a turn lane if your intention is to go straight. I've seen people try to weave their way, especially on the right turns. They try to weave around the car who's already trying to make that right turn. It's just a hassle. Just go around the car on the left if you're going straight. Another thing, buses and streetcars, trains. So, when passengers are getting off a bus or a streetcar, all users, including cyclists, must stop within a reasonable distance. Pop quiz: what is the fine and demerit points if you don't stop for a bus stop? Put in the chat. But yeah, so these are things to be aware of. Streetcars and train tracks. So be careful of these things because your tires can get caught in them. And when it rains, the tracks do get slippery when they're wet. So always try to ride perpendicular to the tracks if you can. And then finally, collisions. So, I hope no one here gets into any collisions, but in the case that something does happen, check your health first and foremost. So if you need immediate medical assistance, call the ambulance or get someone to call the ambulance. I don't know, or hopefully someone who sees you will call the ambulance. And in cases of collisions, cyclists are entitled to benefits, whether it's the money to replace the bike, to pay for health, medical bills, or compensation for wages lost because you're trying to recover from your injury, and try to call the police, exchange contact information if you can, and write down that driver's license plates, number, insurance information, and whatnot. And yeah, planning your route. So this is the last bit. There are two apps I typically use. One is Google Maps. This is common. Everyone uses Google Maps a lot these days, so this is really great because it has the bike lane and cycling features to it. And then another app that is used quite common is Strava because a lot of cyclists use Strava, and so it collects a lot of data about the common routes cyclists take. Planning your route can require a bit of decision making and some experience, because sometimes the most direct route, especially things that Google Maps provides, may not be a couple of things. May not be the most safest, may not be the most fastest route, or the most enjoyable route. And so I'll provide my suggestion about the suggested order of route decision making. So one, I always like to go on routes that use a multi-use trail. And then two, I would use bike lanes that are in the condition that they are protected. Painted is fine for me, but protected is pretty great, and they are continuous. Nothing frustrates me more than just seeing a bike lane that leads to nowhere, or if it's just like for 50 meters and then just disappears. It just doesn't make sense to me. So something that's more continuous and straightforward is really great. And then finally, riding through residential roads or local roads is always a great approach. And yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the route you've decided to take on, go for a test ride. See how it go on a weekend or whenever you're free in the evening, and go for a ride. Sometimes these maps are inaccurate and may not be updated with potential road closures. Or the flip side is that there might actually be some existing cycling infrastructure like bike lanes that haven't been updated online. So always good to check it out, and it always helps to ride with someone who has more experience to help guide you and whatnot. All right, so without further ado, there's so much about cycling to learn about and whatever, but this is really just to get you in the door and to know about the basics of all about cycling. So I hope everyone learned something new here, and weather is getting more and more gorgeous, getting warm out. So please go out and have fun cycling and stay safe. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it open to some Q&As and talk about what's next. So while we're getting more questions out, let me just throw in a quick spiel. So point A, follow our social media. So we got Instagram, so point A_official. We got a LinkedIn, and as well as our website. And if you will have any more questions or thoughts about anything, please feel free to reach out to me through email. I prefer email. Don't call me, unless you really need to. But email me at jhan@pointa.ca. And I'm going to pass it off to Molly.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was great. Yeah, we'll go through our sort of wrap up things, and then hopefully we have a few minutes at the end because there were some good questions in the chat. So I can go back. There's post-webinar questions. Can you put those up, Jesse, or is that?
I will launch it right now. So. All right. So we can throw in the post-webinar questions. So please answer them. It helps me to know how you guys thought about my webinar, and helps us to learn about what other things you want to learn about.
Okay. And while we're doing that, I'll just say a few more things about the rest of Bike Month. For all of Bike Month in the different Smart Commute regions, there is a contest on. So please log your bike trips this month, and each trip will enter you into a draw to win a $100 gift card. Probably the first week of July, those will be drawn. So that's an incentive to also use the app and try that out if you haven't yet, and to just get active and jump on your bike. Deadline to log those trips is July 7th, although it's all for June trips. So you could log July 6th, the trip that you took at the end of June. Am I going down? Next up for our webinars, June 4th, next week, the present and future of cycling in Toronto. As a former Toronto resident, I know there's been huge changes in cycling in Toronto, and probably that pertains somewhat to some of the other cities as well. Following that, equity-based transportation research and experience. More than good enough, advancing public secure bike parking solutions. And then finally, Ontario bike tourism. So leading into the summer, maybe you want to try bike touring, and that would be a good preference for that. We're going to do a gift card draw. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can share in a different screen. So everyone who is here today, unless you joined very late, are eligible to win a $50 gift card sponsored by the City of Toronto for either Presto or MEC. And if you don't have MEC where you are, you can order things online as well. So I'm going to share my Wheel of Fun screen in 1 second. Okay, can you see that? Jesse,
Looks
can you see
good.
the wheel? Okay, so we've got everyone's name in there. We're spinning. Winner. Ooh, Anita Wong. Yay! Congratulations, Anita.
Round of applause.
If you can just let us know your email address or stay on at the end, then we will.
We actually have her email
We
because
have
everyone
that.
registered.
Okay.
So
You don't have to do anything. We will be in touch with you. And then yeah, I think we can just answer some questions. So if that's okay with you, Jesse, take a couple.
Yeah, for sure.
The first one, oh, sorry.
Mhm.
The first one you sort of answered, but I think it's a good question that we might want to revisit for a second, is how you determine the safe range of air pressure and how often you should be checking it.
So that's a good question. Air pressure should, so the rule of thumb that people always kind of mention is that it should feel like your forehead. Um, so which feels pretty stiff. I know it's like there's a bone there, but obviously it should feel pretty stiff, and not like your cheek or whatever it might be. So it shouldn't be squishy at all. It should actually feel pretty firm, for the most part. Obviously, when the weather gets really warm, like we're talking about 30 degrees Celsius and whatever not, you can like try lower your range down by like 5 psi, because everyone knows about physics, right? When hot air gets hotter, it expands more, and you don't want your tires to blow up. So there's that. And how often you should be checking it? If you have a road bike, I would probably say about every time just before you go out for a bike ride. Um, for the average person with an average bike, flat bar bike, whatever it might be, I'd probably say like every couple of rides. I would say, depending on it really depends on how long and how treacherous of a ride you do. All right.
Okay, another one was about e-bikes from Sarah. Are e-bikes different from pedal assisted bikes, and what category would the Toronto bike share e-bikes, I guess, fall into, if you know?
Yeah, I'm not part of the city of Toronto, but I definitely have experienced riding the Toronto City bike, the e-bikes. So those are definitely pedal assist bikes. So they only work when you are pedaling. Otherwise, it will just behave like a normal bicycle. And this differs significantly from e-bikes because I'm sure you've seen it. They're mopeds or whatever it might be. You just press a button or whatever it might be or whatever, and it'll just kind of like the bike will just zoom, and you'll see that they're not even pedaling at all. So these are kind of the differences of bikes that everyone's almost trying to figure out at the moment.
Another question was, will we be sharing the slides? So we will be uploading the webinar video. And I don't know if people wanted just the slides, Jesse, is that available as well? That was from Shelton.
Unfortunately, not. So we'll just only have the recording. So we'll put it on our website, SmartCommute.ca. We're going to upload that on YouTube, and so you can just check it out from there.
Okay, awesome. Question from Sarah. If you're a faster rider approaching a traffic light and there's a bike line ahead, so I guess that's a line of cyclists ahead of you, is it allowed or appropriate to ride up on the left to pass when the light turns green?
The bike lane has right pass. Trying to think what's trying to understand what's happening.
I think
Sarah, actually, I'm gonna give you bike access, Sarah, if you want to like elaborate more about bike lane ahead. I'm assuming this is a bike lane and not line. It's like a typo. As I'll probably ride on the left pass. I'm probably assuming it's fine.
I would say too, as long as you can signal that you're moving out into the left and then proceeding safely. Jesse, another interesting one. I think it's a good question from Jen. Kind of embarrassing, but I'm not great at biking one-handed. Would appreciate tips on that. So I know sometimes, especially if you're turning left or whatever, it is a little bit stressful and not necessarily comfortable to fully signal. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, we mentioned about this all the time in our after school travel with the kids. A lot of kids, aren't comfortable yet riding with just one-handed. Same concept would apply with adults too. I always just say start off easy. So just like while you're riding, just take your hand off for a second and then bring it back into the handlebar and then keep practicing that and like try to push yourself every time to like see if you can like let go of the handlebar with just your one hand without it like completely losing control. And then you'll get to a point where you'll actually be okay while you're holding the handlebar with one hand to point either that way or to point that way.
Awesome. I think those are the questions that I see. And as Jesse said, if you have other questions, he's left his email address. I don't know if you want to just put it in the chat again in case anybody had follow-up. And again, we appreciate everyone coming out and spending their lunch hour with us. And we hope to see you at future webinars this month or next month.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming.
Bye-bye.
Take care.